Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gaming Mix podcast, your official analog stick gaming podcast. You know me, my name is Jordan. I'm in a bit of a different place this week, but you can see why if you're watching the episode. Of course, Jeff is normally on my left, but he's up above me on my left today. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm very excited for this episode. And on your right, we obviously have Mr. Eat Sleep Game himself, Luke. How are you, Luke?
Yeah, alive.
Good. Me and Luke used to do a podcast every week for quite some time, and then Luke decided to do YouTube Shorts and become very, very successful instead.
YouTube Shorts is a part of it, sure.
If you haven't checked out Luke's channel, go and check him out. We'll leave a
Yeah,
link in the
what are you
description.
doing if you haven't? Absolute fail if you haven't.
Who knows? Maybe we will feature in one of Luke's YouTube shorts where he'll send some of his friends over here. And if you are from Luke's channel, please subscribe and keep up to date with us. And also, go and check out Analog Stick Gaming, where we do some very good reviews and keep up with gaming news as well, because there's going to be lots of gaming news over the next few weeks. We've got trailers coming up. Apparently they're all advertising the same sort of way, but we know why that is. But today we're here to talk about one of probably the best games of the year, depending on who you are. I know that one of us here may not feel like that, but that's why this conversation is going to be very, very interesting. So that game, of course, if you're seeing the overlay, is Alan Wake 2. And hopefully by the time you're seeing this episode, I should also have my written review over on the website, so go and check that out. But this will be a full spoiler cast, so we are going to ruin major parts of the game, because I think, and let me know if you two agree, but I feel like you can't do this game justice and talk about it in the right way without spoiling certain very big parts of this game.
I mean, the real justice is just go play it.
That's true. That is true.
I'm pretty sure I had been put in the small print of my contract to appear here today that there'd be no negative talk about Alan Wake. So, we might just have to believe we'll just play elevator music over any negativity.
But don't worry. What I'm going to do is when we get into full spoiler mode, if I can figure it out, maybe Luke will help me because I'm still new at video editing. I'm going to put some text on the screen to basically just tell you that we're going into spoiler mode.
It's a spoiler cast. The whole thing should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
the whole thing's a spoiler warning.
But what I want to do is, for the first few minutes, just let people know where we're all kind of sitting on this game without spoilers, and then we'll go into the full spoiler discussion. So, Luke, just a quick summary. How did you feel about this game?
Dope. I remember texting you, and I was like, "Yeah, this is everything I wanted, Hideo Kojima to do from now on, because it's exactly what I wanted out of kind of Death Stranding in a way. Much shorter experience, nice and condensed. Yeah, I loved it. It was awesome. I didn't really have any expectations of what it was going to be going in after, I love playing all their previous games apart from Max Payne.
I mean, me and you were the Remedy boys, right? we actually thought at one point about doing a Remedy specific, control.
Yeah, we do a bulletin every week sort of thing. Even if there was no news, the news would be there was going to be no news this week. Just 2 seconds, we're done.
So there's that.
Just to annoy Sean.
I, of course, if you've read my review, which should hopefully be up by now, you will know that this game blew me away. And at time of recording, I actually only finished it a short while ago, and I'm still sort of digesting the game. And Luke will know this, it was kind of one of those things where I actually asked Luke at one point, is there any point where this game doesn't keep getting better? And that point might be literally the ending, but we'll talk about that later on. Jeff, how did you feel about the game?
I mean, I'm not a massive Remedy fan. Control, I had nothing but technical issues. My map didn't work through the entire thing. I thought the game was fine. I haven't played the first Alan Wake since it first came out, so like I had really no memory of that game going into this. And Quantum Break uh, was fine for what it is. I didn't absolutely love it, but it was entertaining. So like I've never been a massive Remedy fan. Like if you were to ask me to list my top 10 developers, Remedy would be nowhere near that. So going into Alan Wake 2, I mean like my roommate wanted to play it. I'm like, well, I'll go half on it because I have no interest in paying 100 or 90 bucks for it or whatever. And so we went half on it. So that was my only reason for going into this. And I thought that like everyone had been talking it up, saying like, "Oh, this one part here, it's like a 10 out of 10," and blah 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 blah. That part never came for me. Like that whole like the Ellen the sing was it sing with me or whatever with the that quest. That part was everyone was like just gushing over it, and I'm like, okay, like I thought the game was fine. I think it lives somewhere between good and great. But I
Yeah.
will say that there's one aspect of the game that I think is good, and then
Okay.
there's one part of the game that I think is great.
Interesting.
But there's just
I was
too
gonna
much of
say
it.
that on our scale, right, Jeff? I think you were saying to me the other day that if you were the one reviewing this game, you'd probably score it at kind of a 7.5 or possibly an 8 on our scale. Is what you were saying the other day when you finished?
Yeah, I think if I really sat on it for a while, I'd probably be seeing it about a 7.5, maybe an 8. Um, but it's mainly just because, like, and we'll get into spoilers, there's a part in the game where you get back to something, and I'm like, oh, right, this was the good stuff. This is why I wasn't enjoying it. So we'll get into that. But
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely not hot on it at all.
That's right. I mean, you're not hot on it, but I feel like you're not super low on it either. Like 7.5 on our
Well, I
scale.
don't think it's a bad game. It's the same way as I look at like something like Last of Us Part Two. I didn't like it, but I can appreciate the craftsmanship that went into it,
Yeah.
aside from the writing. But in terms of like the technical and like the gameplay parts of it, I can respect what that game does, even though I don't like it.
Yeah.
And
I
same with
understand
like
that.
Alan Wake 2 is like I can understand why people like it. It's just not hitting me in the exact same way.
That's definitely fair. And I'm glad you're here because that will make this conversation interesting. Otherwise, it's just going to be, up to 2 hours of me and Luke gushing over this game, I think. um, so,
Just an echo chamber of like just writing and like and
let's
do
uh,
the whole
let's
like
get into spoilers. So from here on, honestly, if you have not played the game, stop watching and listening to this show. Like, just don't do it because I know that Jeff might not agree, but for me, what makes this game so great is the narrative, and if you're spoiled on that, it will not hit you in the same way, regardless of you know, regardless of anything really. It's just it yeah. So just please go away, come back another day when you finish the game. I really think you should play it. I think it's one of those games that you should at least try for yourself, even if you wait for a sell. It is one of those sort of must play games, and there's a reason that it's gonna be in so many people's Game of the Year conversations. I think, like Jeff was saying, even he can see that, even if it's not hitting him in quite the same way as it is for other people. So yeah, let's get into it. I don't know how we really want to start here,
I
but
can't believe they killed Alan Wake with a bus.
but
Well, if you look into the backstory and the lore and like the comic books that were released, the bus makes a lot of sense, quite frankly.
That's
I'm surprised that it wasn't done sooner. I thought it was going to be coming sooner, but they kept swerving us.
just credits, not a bus.
Yeah. I like the art style they used on the little Alan Wake sprite was interesting as well.
So I guess where we should start, honestly, is the fact that this game is a little bit different to the first game in the sense that the first game was more of a kind of action adventure, not really horror-ish game, and then this time around they've gone more of the survival horror route, but they've also done something very different to the likes of Resident Evil 4 remake, which is it's kind of very action focused still, and this feels like a very narrative focused game.
Yeah, but you have each character has pretty much 3 guns. You find ammo everywhere. There's countless attacks and like there's bosses, like legit bosses where you have to shoot them. This is an action game.
Yeah, I'm not saying it
In,
isn't an
in,
action
in the
game,
same.
just to be clear.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I know. I know. I
Yeah,
still think
it's kind of found that ground between Resident Evil 4 and like Resident Evil 2 sort of thing. It kind of plays around there. I wouldn't say it was a horror game, like at all. I don't think any
That's
of it was scary,
interesting.
bar like the jump scary bits.
So
But like,
I think it's
thrillery, I think.
atmospheric horror
Yeah.
more so.
I think it's
Yeah.
atmospheric horror, and we're
But, like,
getting.
I've seen people like saying that like this game has like very like toned down action elements, and I'm like, where were the toned down action elements?
Yeah, no, there's still solid action in there.
Yeah, there is still
yeah.
solid action in the game for sure. I think that the reason I would say it's different to, let's say, a Dead Space or a Resident Evil 4 remake, which is the two other kind of survival horror games that came out this year that everyone's been raving about as well, is those feel a lot more like constant action, whereas this you do get sections where there is literally no action and it's just about you kind of exploring and building out the narrative and all this kind of stuff. I think they've done something really clever in this game, and it's not new for survival horrors, but obviously you play as two different characters here. One being Saga Anderson and one being Alan Wake. But the way that the actual core gameplay is the same with both of these, in the sense of they kind of control the same. One is maybe a bit better at dodging than the other, but it sort of makes sense. I feel like Saga, you can tell that she is an FBI agent. Do you know what I mean? Like, there are little details there where it's like, okay, she knows what she's doing a bit more with a gun. Even the way that she holds the gun and the torch is different to how Alan does. And I like that small detail of like, okay, this is someone that actually had training.
Yeah, it's weird how you have a character that looks like John Wick and has no like gun skill. Sort of weird.
But what I think is really clever about having two characters in this game specifically is that Saga is a good touch point for players who are not that familiar with Alan Wake, and maybe they played it a long time ago and don't remember a lot, or maybe they've never played it at all. I don't think it's perfect in the way of being able to bring in new players without playing the first game. I would recommend, watching some sort of recap, and there is really good ones out there.
Isn't there a recap option at the beginning? Oh no, that was Spider-Man. Never mind.
Luke actually
there
thought
was
we were
I'm
doing
editing.
Spider-Man Spoilercast.
I'm editing Spider-Man at the same time.
I can't believe they killed Spider-Man with a bus.
I killed Spider-Man multiple times with multiple things.
But yeah, what I liked is that Saga is kind of a good way to get new players in because she doesn't even understand the world, and as she learns, the players are learning. I think it's
I don't
quite
really
clever.
think people need to play the first game. I think they do kind of contain it well enough that like you could have no knowledge of anything else and just play the second one.
I agree that you don't need to have played it. I think it's one of those situations like we've seen before, right? Where if you've played it though, there are things that you're going to have a deeper understanding of, which
like the
same with
naked
Control.
guy at the very beginning.
yeah.
To be fair, I forgot who that was. It's been a
That's
long time, so I was just like, "Oh, okay, I think I'm gonna have to blur that."
That
But then
naked guy,
didn't
I know who you are.
Yeah, I recognize that ass.
All the people looking at the ERSV going, "Oh, nudity in this game."
So I want to ask you guys before we kind of move on to serious spoiler stuff, if you will, where we're actually going to talk about the narrative and things. How did you feel about the gameplay of this game, and is there one of the characters you preferred playing as over the other one? Luke, why don't you go first as our guest?
I thought the gameplay did its job. I don't think it was amazing. I thought it was fine. I don't particularly have a preference over which character I played as because this is entirely my kind of game. Like, I was interested in both sides. I was curious whether we were going to get to the end of the game and with everything that Saga goes through, she was going to get recruited by the FBC, and then I was curious to see where Alan was going. But both kind of held my interest fairly well. I didn't have a preference.
That's fair. That's fair. For me, by the end of the game, I didn't have a preference. What I would say is early on, I actually really enjoyed those early Alan sections because they just felt very different and they had... I'm not saying Saga's stuff wasn't tense, but it never felt quite as tense. And when I was in Alan's sections, when you're in that train station, and you're looking for the murder site for the first time, it actually felt like something was watching me. Do you know what I mean? It felt like I was being followed by something. And I loved that on the Alan side, it's like you see these shadows and they talk and you don't know which one is going to attack you. And it always kind of keeps you on edge of okay, which one is it going to be?
I actually figured out which one's going to attack you pretty quickly.
Did you? Okay, that's interesting.
They're pretty. They've
got a little bit more of a solid mass than the other ones.
They do,
If you kind of look at them.
I thought they did move more, but then I had a few that didn't attack me at all that were still doing the zoom in around thing.
No, they'll wander around, but the ones that are going to attack you are going to kind of adjust to your path.
Interesting.
And adjust to come right at you. Okay. So they were pretty easy to spot, and then I saved loads of ammo in the end.
I bet you did, yeah. Once you can figure that out, but
yeah,
I'm kind of glad I didn't because I think that would have impacted my experience negatively. I loved, and also if you play this game with headphones, man, the audio design in this game is phenomenal, right? I think we'd all be kind of up there with audio in particular on this game because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how good the audio is. Just kind of, again, setting that tension, but even the way that certain things sound, and when you hear the little voices and you make out what they're saying, some of them will be like, Alan Wake, get out of my story and stuff like that, it's like...
Doesn't one of them go we're rated number 1 in the 300 countries and blah blah blah, he's talking up some attraction or something like that.
So I really like that side of stuff.
One, yeah.
And also I think that for me, what part of it was as well is early on there were more kind of puzzly elements, if you like, with Alan. There obviously these puzzles, in the end, they're actually quite simple, most of them, but they broke up the gameplay in a way that I found really interesting. And the first time you do the light shifting stuff, and it's just oh, that's cool. That's a neat the
Titanfall 2 moments
gameplay thing. That's pretty cool. And then the other thing is, and this was the biggest thing that I found to be a difference between the two characters, and I don't know if either of you would agree, but I think that Alan's upgrade tree, if you will, was way better than Saga's. Finding the words of power and having so many different options with that.
When you can actually collect them, the amount of times that I've pointed something at it, I'm I am shining the flashlight at it.
Yeah. It was so
word of power, and then you move it to the side away from the word of power, and it collects it, and I'm oh my.
Yeah. That, and I just don't care about skill trees anymore. I'm so done with them.
That's fair.
Once there was the health upgrade one, I'm sick. I'm cool. Yeah. I did still go around and get them all because I this is why I didn't record the game in the end. I just spent so much time doing everything.
Exploring this world, man. I loved it.
Yeah, I couldn't care less about skill trees.
That's fair. That's fair. I know that because you felt kind of similar about Spider-Man, right? Where it was kind of you just...
I feel the same about everything. God of War, all of it. There's skill trees and everything. They're so dead. They're so boring.
So, Jeff, for you, because I know obviously you're a bit lower on the game compared to me and Luke, and Luke just kind of gets on and plays a game, I think, most of the time. How did you feel about the gameplay, Jeff?
Well, like the thing with me is like I was playing it and I just wasn't like I wasn't feeling it for quite a while, and it wasn't until a key moment. So I got to the end of Saga's story where it says like this, you have to go back to Alan now. The moment I came back to Saga and I'm on the beach and I have to finish that fight and fight, Alan, I was like, oh right, the Alan Wake stuff sucked. This is the stuff that I actually liked. Like the Saga stuff was actually pretty fun. Like I liked the environment, I liked like how spooky it kind of was. And like at that moment I'm like, that's what's been killing me. Anything to do with this anything to do with Alan Wake in this game, I just didn't care for. And I'm the exact opposite with you. It's like I didn't like any of the Alan Wake stuff. Like switching the rooms around and stuff, I thought that was just kind of lazy, where it's kind of like, okay, we're going to give you like 3 or 4 options. One's going to move you forward. And I'm going to walk into a room and be like, okay, is it orange today? No. Is it blue? No. Is it red? Oh, okay. Yep. Progress through. It didn't interest me enough to switch those things around. And I'll get back to that kind of talk later with Saga. But the Alan Wake stuff, I just didn't care for. I don't know if it was like his narrating and stuff like that. I don't know if it was like his voice actor. I don't know if it was just something, because I think it was just Alan's, like I like going around that city because it looked really, really nice. Like that part was like gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even when I was back as Alan Wake in the Saga area, I was like, okay, this is actually pretty good. So I'm like, maybe it was just watery. Maybe it was just like those areas and stuff that I liked. But I liked Saga's stuff because to me that felt more like the survival horror stuff that I like.
Mm-hmm.
It just like you're going into cabins, you're going into little houses, you're going like walking through the forests and stuff like
And
that. It was better that way.
yeah, and just to be clear, I still really liked the Saga stuff. I found the Alan stuff to be almost like more original. It felt like it was bringing something to the genre that was slightly different. I loved the kind of narration from Alan, because that's obviously kind of like his inner voice, right?
Well, I thought it was really funny because sometimes you'd pick up those manuscripts and she'd sit there and read it. And then other times you pick it up and it would just go into your inventory. And I'm like, was that not important? I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I'm not checking that out. But it's like everybody was all up on that We Sing thing with the whole big song and dance number as Alan's going through. And I'm like, yeah, this is kind of cool. But like the part on the beach with Saga, when you have the old gods of Asgard playing on the bus and they were fighting and you're doing that big fight. I'm like, this is the best part of this game by miles. Like this was actually fun because everyone's cheering for you and stuff like that. Like that part was actually really good.
Interesting. Because again, those are the two parts where we kind of split. I actually did like both parts. I said to you, Jeff, that they're kind of equal for me, but the We Sing part, even though I'd heard vaguely about it, I was spoiler free enough that it actually shocked me, and it kind of leads me into the fact that part of this game and the way it's telling its narrative and even part of the gameplay is using live action, right? Which we've seen Remedy do before, but I would say that their use of it in this game is so much better than they've ever done in the past.
Yeah.
Like the Quantum Break stuff was cool, but it almost felt too separate from the rest of the game.
Quantum Break stuff was crap. I hated the live action stuff.
It was
rubbish.
And then
they made it better in Control. But then they've got like a good evolution and use of it here with a good mix. The Quantum Break stuff was crap because you'd finish a gameplay section and then
it would be an entire section. Yeah.
And it was rubbish TV. It had nothing to do with what you were doing.
The thing that I didn't like about it here is it just furthered that divide where the graphics just aren't as photorealistic as I think that they could have been in regards to making those transitions a bit more seamless. Because like you see like Saga, and then you see Saga real life, and they
Yeah.
kind of still look like two different people.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
sort of weird. Like some people handle it a lot better. I think some models are definitely better when it comes to echoing the real life and that stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
You
The
can get that
live
with
action
certain
footage,
hairstyles and stuff as well. Like
yeah,
some hairstyles are just never going to look as good. Like,
Yeah.
they're just so much more difficult to like
Absolutely.
render and stuff.
There is another element to gameplay, of course. We've talked a lot about combat and how I think most people I've spoken to while playing the game and who have finished the game all sort of agree it's like combat is this weird thing because even if you're someone that thinks it's decent, like I do, it's still the weakest part, probably, of a very strong game for most people.
the shooting was just not fun. Like
Yeah, it was
you play
funny.
something like Resident Evil 4, which it's emulating with the the basic ideas there,
Yeah.
but the shooting just never felt fun. Like even you go in to turn like aim assist on, and like there was no aim assist whatsoever,
Yeah.
like in the
Oh,
slightest bit.
I was
Like
playing mouse
yeah,
and keyboard. I never like
yeah,
it
but I
felt
mean
okay on mouse and keyboard, but
like
mostly on
trying to hit
keyboard.
those damn wolves, I was like, just fuck off. Like the wolves
Mm.
were so bad.
Yeah. I
That was the only
It,
part I
I
didn't like about Saga stuff.
Yeah, I never really had too much trouble with like the any gameplay, but like I said, I was playing mouse and keyboard, so maybe it's just a bit better to control mouse and keyboard than it was on like a
probably
controller.
probably.
But
Um
it like the gameplay's fine.
yeah, and that's kind of my thing. Like I think the gameplay is decent in the sense of it never felt unengaging to me, and when gameplay becomes unengaging, that is when it becomes, you know, that's the point where it's like, okay, this isn't doing a good job. I was always engaged in the gameplay, even if I am aware it's like, yeah, there are games in this genre of game that do shooting better. I will say something though, and this is the other pillar of gameplay in Alan Wake 2. I don't think there are many, if any, games that do exploration and kind of narrative world building as part of the gameplay as good as this game does. Like when I was walking around and you'd find the little, you even like every little thing you would find tells a story, and that was so cool. Like you'll find a lunchbox and that's kind of telling its own little story. You'll find the stashes and they're telling their own little story. You've got in the dark place, you've got the like the Tim Breaker stuff, right? And you'll kind of
Tim Breaker.
yeah, I think
I thought that as
everybody's
well.
As soon as I figured that out, I was like, I want to uninstall this game.
I think they're clearly leaving that there for a situation where they can ever connect Quantum Break to this universe.
I don't know. I kind of think the opposite.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think they're using that as like, yeah, get it, but no, we're not doing it again.
I guess it's kind of like the Max Payne thing, right? Where there's
No. They've come out since then and said Max Payne and Quantum Break want nothing to do with this universe.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's kind of like the Max Payne thing where there's a very clear nod to Max Payne several times in this game.
Well,
But,
I mean, Max Payne's in the game.
yeah. So there you
It's just
go.
Max Payne.
But basically, yeah, I just loved the fact of like, Luke was saying earlier that he was actually going to do a playthrough of this game on his YouTube channel originally, and then he decided not to because you just loved exploring around this place, right, Luke? And you were kind of doing it at your own pace.
Yeah, it was kind of just going off of how I played like the first Alan Wake. It's like DLC and Control, and I was like, I'm just going to keep this one for me. I'm just going to enjoy it. Because otherwise it would have been like 50 odd hours. I'd have to, because I spent ages going through everything.
Yeah, and I loved it, man. Like, and what I like about the exploration as well is that moment that I realized, and it's early in the game before you meet Alan for the first time, or kind of as you meet him for the first time, you realize that you can now go back and explore other areas that you couldn't get to before. And it's like, okay, that's cool. Let's go over there and have a look right now, you know? And you, like,
Yeah, because it removes the flooding, yeah.
And I thought that was really cool because it gave a reason to explore, and it tied the exploration to the narrative. But like I said, alongside the combat part of it, exploration is kind of the other pillar that holds this entire gameplay experience up, right? It's kind of, those are the two main things you do in this game. You look around, you find manuscript pages, you find other little things, and this game is super narrative heavy, which brings me to another element I want to talk about, which I know that not everybody likes, but I actually think, and maybe this is the designer part of me, but I think was really clever and was actually needed for this game, and that is, you have Saga's Mind Placed, where you're essentially placing these things as you find them onto the caseboard, right? But what
only in the places
yeah,
that they go.
yeah, because the caseboard is not actually really part of the gameplay. It's just a way to keep up with everything that's going on, right? It's kind of like I don't know if either of you played Final Fantasy 16. I think you did, Jeff. But you have the active time lore in that, where you can press a button during a cutscene or whatever and it will bring up a menu which tells you who these characters are and where they are in the story.
But in
at
that
the time.
case, you don't have to like drag the king of this country over and go, oh no, he's not the king there. Drag him over there. No, he's not the king over there. Oh, there he fits right there. Like,
so, and that's why I say the one way that I would improve this system is I think they should have almost like an auto solve thing, where it's like if you
should just made it automatic. Like,
yeah.
I think it should have been linked to more like key bits where you had to do that, but the rest of them should have just kind of been there ready, because it's something she already figured out, sort of thing.
Yeah, like you get the ones with the lunch boxes and the puzzle pieces, and I'm like that. I just let those. I'm like, those are useless.
Well, the other thing is, those are literally just to keep track of how many collectibles you have, right? That easily could have been in a separate little menu, like how you have the menu with like how many radio shows you've collected and stuff, and it's literally just them in a list, and it tells you how many there are. It could have been like that, you know.
The thing with Saga's evidence board, that should have been automatic. It should have just automatically put everything like that, because, and this is why, at the end, when you get trapped in there and you have to then find all of these negative thoughts for the case board to all the positive thoughts, making that manual would have completely flipped that whole gameplay segment and would have made that putting the pieces where you needed to would have made it more memorable. Because suddenly all of a sudden, like, oh wait, it's your case board.
Yeah, you now have to do it. Yeah,
big time. Or like just having it where you do it with a few key moments through the game, where it's like, oh, this is this, and this ties to this sort of thing.
But again,
where you place the picture, like the main picture that everything branches off of. Yeah. But all of the other stuff, it's like, oh, Odin wants this. Okay, it should have automatically gone there with little bits of narrative as she would like place those pieces to just give you that clarification.
And again, that's what I would say is, it's not a perfect system. However, I'm glad that it's in here, because it's one of those things where it's like, this is a super narrative heavy game, to the point where, like I was saying earlier, when you're exploring, almost everything you find in some way builds on the narrative of the game. Like, there's actual traditional environmental storytelling, like when you're going around with Alan and you're seeing graffiti on the walls, even some of the graffiti literally will tell you part of the story or play into the narrative somehow. It's really, really clever stuff, and it is a lot to keep up with. And I think that something like Saga's caseboard on her side does help to keep up with things quite well. It's just the way that the system is implemented isn't perfect, for sure.
if I had to sort the Mass Effect compendium for the lore for me to understand the story, I would have hated Mass Effect.
Yeah.
I would have been I'd get fucked BioWare.
Yeah. No, I get
You
that.
know,
I get
'cause
that
that
for
that was
sure.
my like again, if you had control of it during that last little moment,
Hmm.
I would have loved the case board because it would have gave it
Mm.
purpose for me to actually interact with
Yeah.
it.
And I also
And it would
think,
have made that moment more powerful.
yeah, and I also think the other thing is Alan's storyboard has more of a gameplay effect, right? Where it's like with Alan, you'll find the scenes, you place the different things, and yeah, you can only place. There's only really one that matters on each thing, but it actually has some sort of effect. It has a tangible effect. And yeah, there is that aspect of like, you have to have placed certain parts on the board as Saga in order to continue the story at certain stages, but they don't really have a gameplay effect. It's not like the profiling where when she profiles someone, she will then maybe get extra dialogue options and things like that to kind of expand the story and narrative even more. It's literally, we're placing it on here so that when you come back and play tomorrow, you can have a quick look at this and remember exactly what's going on. It's
Yeah, I don't think like I think it should have more gameplay stuff. Like you said, if it's not going to be something you need to be actively interacting with, have it like autofill because it's something she's already figured out. Because if you put it in the wrong place, she's like, "That's not right." It's like, well, then you clearly know where it goes.
yeah,
Have it like you've only got to put certain things, and then you're like, you're playing it with the character
yeah,
instead of doing it for the character.
yeah,
So then
absolutely.
the character's like, "Oh, okay,
And
cool. So
also,
this means
they
this."
could have actually had it in a few moments where and it would have been complicated because, like I said, this is quite a hard narrative to keep up with anyway. But I do think there could have been a few gameplay moments with that system where it's like you place something in the wrong place, and it literally for a little while it might have led you down the wrong path, right? So maybe it could be like you ended up accusing somebody of these murders that and you've just wasted, do you know what I mean? Like something where, because there are certain things where you think something about one person in the game and then that ends up being totally different, right? Or they do interesting stuff like that, but they don't make that part of the gameplay, which is,
Like accusing Rose as being like head of the cult or something like that.
yeah, like I thought something like that could be really interesting. And that's why the system almost feels like they played it too safe. I
It's kind of a remedy thing, though. Like you were saying about the live action stuff. Like they do stuff like this all the time, where in one game they're kind of putting it in, playing with it, and being like, "Oh yeah, this is cool," and then in the next game they'll improve it loads, and then the game after that it'll be like, "Yeah, spot on."
And that's
Um,
why their games have got better over time, right?
yeah, it's a constant evolution, but a lot of the things they try with the Alan Wake side of it, though. I I I do agree with Jeff. Like they really need to, add some variety to that because just changing the scenery each time was like after the first like two times I think I did it, I
Yeah, it's
was
like,
like,
oh, there's
okay,
stairs
cool.
here now. Oh my god. Oh,
Yeah,
there's blood
yeah, yeah,
stairs
yeah.
on the ground.
Like you only
Fantastic.
change them more than you need to go and find all the collectibles and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But like
Yeah.
you could have done extra things where it's like, oh, you're gonna, yeah, add in this scene means that there's
Yeah. And
X
then
amount extra
I saw
danger
people
or
They could have had, and I know that Jeff isn't a fan of the boss fights in this game, but they could have had something like secret boss fights where you activate the wrong scene in the wrong place and you
there'd be
encounter an enemy
enemies
that
going
you'd
around there.
never see otherwise.
I wouldn't have
Yeah.
necessarily done that, but like say like there's an area that's blocked off by like it's boarded up or whatever. Instead of just changing the scene, add a scene in so something happens.
Yeah.
So like, oh, we're gonna add in a fight here so I can knock this person
Mhm.
through it and open that up, sort of thing.
Yeah, because like
And play
even
with it more.
like everybody was kind of like apparently like losing their shit when he was using the little clicker or whatever and like changing the scenery. I'm like, ooh, they took a wall away. Oh no, they added a door here. This is revolutionary. Like I'm like Titanfall 2 did that without an SSD. So like changing the environment in a Switch like that doesn't impress me anymore. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart did in the entire world changed when you change things, and this
Yeah.
one it's like it
And it's
changed a
funny,
room.
because with that game as well, when you actually pay attention, what they're doing isn't even that impressive. Like not to knock on that game, but what Ratchet and Clank
Oh,
actually
it's just
does,
like split screen.
yeah,
And then you just change what
it,
thing you're focusing
it's
on.
not that impressive. So, and
But
I don't.
I think it's less a technical thing. I think it is just like you could be more creative with it
Yeah,
and
it's the
like play
way it's
around with
implemented,
how you're
right?
changing the scene
Yeah,
instead
Like
of
if
just changing like it's
yeah,
the before,
yeah,
after,
like
and like future thing.
like if you're in like a subway or something like that, right? And you're changing the scene, and it's like, wait a minute, what if this wasn't a subway? What if this was like a supermarket? And then it changes it, and all of a sudden I'm in a massive Walmart or something like that.
Um,
I think
yeah,
I
I
would
kind
be
of get
more
you. I think
impressed
you
if,
changed the situation more because
yeah,
I get what you mean about the
it doesn't change the
yeah, change the
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, change
uh,
like the situation that's going on. If you change it
Luke.
to
Sorry, Luke.
mm,
Just to be a little bit of a pain, could you turn your audio down slightly on your side, please? You're a little bit loud. Thank you.
you gotta be loud. If they changed it so like the situation changed as well, because like after the first time, that's fine. Change, this is changed to I can't remember. The end one was like a cult thing. Like this is what it looks like
Yeah.
after they've done their ritual or whatever. Um, and then like the next, like just progress that each time, so it's actually affecting more than just the surroundings. Like affect the situation, affect what's going on, affect how dangerous it actually is
It's
to
like in
be
the
there.
theater, it's like it puts like a red carpet in front of the door, and then another thing changes it so that there's just like these like metal railing dividers, and then another one changes it so that there's just like chairs sitting all in front, and I'm like,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
this is
it's
dumb.
effectively the opening of Garden of Banban when you just press the time, you just see a slightly different scene each one. Like it is just changing the scenery. It's not
Yeah.
really changing too much within
And
that.
I think
If
that
it
part
changed it
of
so
it,
it's like busier and more
and
dangerous,
I
then
think the
that
part of
would
it
have
that
been interesting.
makes it less meaningful, right, is kind of what we said about how the only reason you'd go into those other scenes is to find collectibles, and there is in some of them some really interesting world building stuff you can find, but the issue is it's kind of like, and the same with the saga side of things, it just feels like one of those systems where they didn't quite go far enough to make it
It was
really
yeah, it
meaningful.
was a means to an end. They didn't actually like they figured like this is cool, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
Like they could have
yeah,
upped it each time, changed it each time,
yeah.
sort of thing.
Um,
Because like each one was the same sort of changes as well.
so let's
It
start
didn't
getting
really
into the
change too much.
narrative here, because for me, the narrative is what made the game as good as it was. I think Luke, I know you're a very narrative heavy gamer as well,
Mm.
so that probably played a big part for you. Jeff, before we get into the narrative, how did you feel about the narrative of this game?
Well, I mean, my audio was like off, like the dialogue seemed like it was an issue with I think the Xbox release
Xbox
that within the
specifically.
first like
I had it in one
within the first
scene, luckily, because when I played, the next time I played, they'd actually patched it, and I never
yeah.
had it again after that.
Yeah. So most of the time that I played it, like the audio was just like just off where like a syllable like would change. They would just move their mouth away from the syllable as it started. It was just weird. Um, yeah, I think like the interesting stuff of like Saga being pulled into this and the story kind of writing her in a way was pretty interesting. I still found it weird how Jesse Faden from Control wasn't the other character here, considering the DLC for Alan Wake has him writing her into the story or something like that. So it was, I don't know, it was sort of weird that they went with Saga
She
as
did
opposed to like
kind of. She was in the background on a couple of things, so it sounds like they're potentially setting up something happening with her side of stuff at the same
I think
time.
they're saying she's still
She popped
stuck
up
in
on
the.
TVs and stuff.
I think they're saying that she's still stuck in the oldest house, right?
Maybe I don't know if I don't think this takes place at the same time as Control.
No, so and I think Remedy has clarified this as well, but what people seem to have figured out is they are actually going for the events of each game happen in real world time. So like there's the point where Alan says or or Saga says to Alan, "You've been missing for 13 years, right?" And it's like that isn't just a nice little nod to the fact that the first game was 13 years ago. It's like even in Control, there's bits of paper you can pick up that talk about events of Alan Wake and things that happened after Alan Wake that are specifically dated.
I can't remember when it was, but there was an FBC agent that said that there was something going on at the oldest house. So I think Control is probably going to take place, or Control 2 is probably going to take place in a similar sort of time, and we're going to figure out what happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe like half of it, like the beginning half, is like overlapping with this, and then they come together. I don't know. We'll see. But I think they explain about that.
Back to my thoughts on the story. Yeah, like the Alan stuff again didn't really interest me at all. Like again, like I don't have this deep connection to Alan Wake 1. So him missing and trying to find Alice and all that kind of stuff, and even the scenes with Zane, like that stuff didn't really interest me at all. Like again, like I like the Saga stuff to a certain extent. I have a ceiling on that for sure. But like I do like the stuff with the old guards of Asgard and like the connections there, and that stuff was kind of neat. But yeah, like again, like to me the story didn't really pull me in any certain direction. I never felt engaged by it. I never like there are certain characters that I do like that get introduced, like the brothers that run the coffee world and all that stuff, because they're all played by one guy. He just slaps a different beard on. But no, like there's parts of it that I do actually like, but it's pretty much just the Saga stuff. Because to me, having that the FBI case and all that kind of stuff come out, like even when I can't remember her character name, but Janine, when she comes in,
Kieran
FBC
Estevez she's the FBC
like
agent.
When she comes out, when she comes out, like that stuff is still pretty interesting. Like I do like the stuff with like Scratch, even though like I think anyone saw that coming.
Yeah.
But and again, like there's parts of it that I'm still like not terribly impressed with. Like I don't like the ending at all to the game. To me, I was just like I just sat there and I was like,
I can understand that. So let's talk about the ending for a minute, and I want to be clear: we're not actually going to spoil the ending here. We won't tell you what happens.
Spoilercast,
but Spoilercast, we'll spoil it.
Should we spoil the ending though?
I'll start.
Yes. If people are watching this,
it's a spoiler cast.
If people are watching this, it's a spoiler cast.
Okay, we're gonna spoil the ending. Go on, Luke.
You've said the spoiler warning. I'm with Jeff. I didn't really like the ending. I thought the ending was super anticlimactic, just to end up like it makes sense for Alan. He sacrifices himself to and ends up having to stay there. Yeah. That makes sense. Why is Saga stuck there as well?
And why is Casey stuck there too? Like why are like
I think
it'd be kind of interesting if Casey was waiting still, like the only one there.
I was waiting for Saga to like stare at the camera. It's like looks like we're gonna have to go into Alan Wake 3 credits. Like that's what it felt like. It's like, oh, you're gonna finish this story in the next one.
Well,
or you'd be like, oh, we've got no control over this.
Yeah. I do think. So I'm not quite as low as you guys on it, but what I would say is that for me, it would actually be if I was nitpicking, because I liked the narrative that much that the ending didn't really harm it too greatly for me. I do think they almost leaving it open makes sense, but I think they left it a little bit too open. Does that
I think it's an issue that is left open. I think where people are just doesn't really make too much sense.
Yeah.
Like if it was just Alan in there, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even if you had Casey in there, it kind of makes sense because he got shot or something. He was injured, so like him being stuck there potentially keeps him alive. But like, why are all three?
I also think that this is one of the this is one of the issues that you probably run into when you're doing this connected universe thing, right? Because we haven't really seen this before in games. We've obviously seen it in movies and stuff, but the problem is they're leaving it open because you're going to, and the feeling that then is, okay, you're going to finish this in the next game, but I guarantee you these characters will have some part to play in Control too, right?
Yeah. But, again, it's not that it's left open, it's just where those characters are.
Yeah.
Like I said,
because like to
Casey
me,
kind of
like
makes sense.
Saga, like honestly, if you're gonna end it where Saga has to go back in, why not just have her calling? Husband picks up, says the daughter's been taken, and then all of a sudden like something from the other side essentially kind of dictates that Saga's gonna have to go back into like the dark place, whatever, to like save her
Yeah.
daughter or something like that. Something that has her, okay, she's in the real world now, but that doesn't matter because she literally has to go back in.
Yeah.
Or like leave it ambiguous. So like it's clear that Alan's gone in. We don't know where Casey is, and you're just left with like Saga trying to phone her husband and see how the kid is, and it's
Yeah.
just ringing.
Yeah.
So you don't actually know. Give it like an Inception kind of event. So you don't know if she's stuck in a different place in what did they call it? I can't remember what they called the place. I keep
Place?
calling it the Upside Down. The dark place, thank you.
Yeah.
You don't know if she's stuck in a different dark place, if she's stuck in the real world, or if she's stuck kind of just somewhere else in wherever Alan Wake is, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think you can leave it a bit more ambiguous and leave it a bit more like interesting for the next bit. It's not that it's left open because it was gonna be, because there's more stuff to come.
Yeah.
It's just kind of where
And I
are.
agree with you as well, Luke. The other thing is leaving it open and leaving it specifically in the way they did for Alan makes sense, because
For Alan, yep.
that now plays really strongly into, okay, we actually have that mid-credit scene weirdly gives a much deeper understanding of actually what's going on. If you kind of take the layers back a bit of what gets said by Alice in that scene, it kind of tells you why Alan is stuck in a way.
Well, I mean, even without that, just with the story, it makes sense because he sacrifices himself to stay there because, you know, he's got this monster that's taken over him, sort of thing. He doesn't know how to control it and whatnot. And the same with Casey. Casey could be stuck there because that's the only way he lives, potentially.
Is Saga stuck there because I might be fuzzy on it, but didn't she slightly changed how Alan was going to approach the end and say, no, I'll do it?
Yeah, she was going to do it.
She kind of
instead.
became a co-writer as well.
So I wonder if like that little step is why she's there. But yeah, I still think, I still think that she should have got out and then have a reason to then
and that's kind of what I do agree with from it is, if it had ended almost in the same way, but she was out of the dark place back in the real world doing that phone call, do you know what I mean? If she was doing that, if it was,
or even like she calls it and there's an answering machine message and it's Scratch.
Yeah, like
saying
like you can leave it
if you reach this.
You can leave it in the way they did. It's just like you guys said. It's kind of where they are doesn't make sense.
Anticlimactic, because it's like the whole thing was, you know, fighting to get people out of it, and they're just kind of okay with being there in the end.
Yeah.
Whereas like,
however, there is part of me. I want to go into another character here. There's part of me that I think the reason Saga might still be there is Mr. Door. Because I mean, that's so heavily.
They've been they've been teasing him since Control. Like that's a thing that's been coming.
Well, like I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be Lance Reddick because like he played.
I think it was originally. Yeah, I think it probably was originally because I actually did some digging and apparently they didn't record his live action stuff until this year. And that kind of makes more sense to me then, of like, oh, okay. But he was a really interesting character. I think they've left a lot of mystery with him, but the clear thing that they do kind of keep putting in there, right? Keep feeding you is he is Saga's dad. right? Like,
Possibly.
like, what I like about his
I
character,
mean, it kind
though-
of helps. He's like the only other black character as well.
yeah, but he
Like,
makes
if
the
they
point.
mock things, some others.
But he
like,
makes the point to Alan of like, you have caused me a problem, right? You have written
doesn't he
something
like
to me.
directly?
You've written
reference,
something.
like, his
You've written
daughter
something
at
really
some
important to me into the story. And what is the only
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
that
yeah.
Alan's really written into the story? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, then the old gods of Asgard are like they're upset at Dor,
yeah,
and then like the only other character they're upset at in the entire game is Saga's father.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And David Harewood is a fantastic actor.
He is
I like him a lot.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
He's really cool.
fantastic. But yeah, I thought that character was really interesting because they also leave him in a place where it's like he's kind of good, but he might also be the ultimate bad in this world potentially.
I think they've painted him as kind of good in any way. I think they are teasing that he is a problem.
Yeah.
Like he seems to be quite like early on in the Alan Wake sort of stuff. He's always
He's one of those
kind
villains that just like exudes positive energy. So maybe there could.
Yeah.
I
He's a
think
good guy,
I
you know?
think the stuff of like him taking Breaker as well and us not really completely understanding why that's going on and Breaker trying to figure out who he is and why he keeps seeing him and all this stuff. That's really interesting to me because that's kind of like a side thing that could become a much bigger thing potentially.
I think he might be one of the people you play as in one of the DLC things. Because the DLC is meant to be different characters. It's
And
not
there's
linked to
two
Alan
DLCs, right? So one thing I've heard so far is people have speculated that one of the DLCs is that you play as Saga, but she's doing some stuff for the FBC. I don't know if that's going to happen.
I don't think so. I would put money that you will play, or it will be about the cop whose name I forget. Actually, I forgot both their names.
Because
the one who gets
one of them
taken.
One of the DLCs said that it would shine light on other aspects of what Alan and Saga are up to.
Interesting. Okay. So that means one of them is going to play directly into the main narrative then, surely.
That what they both are going to be linked to it. It just sounds like they're going to be mostly looking at other characters. So I'd imagine one is going to be like Sam Lake's character.
That would be interesting. I want to play
as him.
That would be
because
interesting.
I feel like he's Max Payne.
Yeah, he basically
is just their Max Payne.
Okay. So Night Springs 2024 will allow players to control several familiar characters from the Alan Wake setting.
Ooh, okay.
The Lake House is players will explore the Lake House in the expansion in the two separate adventures as the realities of Alan Wake and Saga Anderson once again collide.
Okay, so that sounds like the one that's maybe more key to the main narrative, and that was the one I'd heard about that was going to be directly something to do with the FBC, so it probably plays into Control 2 as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. I wouldn't be surprised if they do the same thing they did with Control, where they use one of the DLCs in this game to literally set up Control 2, because that's essentially what they did with the Alan Wake DLC in Control, right? But yeah, this game, at points, I almost lost the narrative, but I loved that it was so complicated. I don't know really how to explain that.
Okay, so what I'm going to say, for Control 2 or Alan Wake 3, whichever one comes next, there needs to be a story explainer. Stick with me. For Control, for Alan Wake, Control, Alan Wake 2, at the very start of Control 2, that is told by Ati.
Ati, yes. Yes.
I love Ati, yes.
That. Like in his own little like language and all that kind of stuff.
Kind of like the guy from Ant-Man doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, but and it's and have their characters like move to like his thing. Because like Ati's fantastic.
Do you know what though? I will say when I
lost it when he turned up. I was like,
when I first saw him in the game, I was like, oh yeah, I was like, oh, it's amazing. But then there was this split second where I was like, what the fuck is he doing here? Like, why is he in the dark place? But then
He doesn't have his
But
headphones, so he's already given
Yeah.
them to Jesse at that point.
yeah, and then you also start to think about, if you've played Control, you obviously learn more about him and why. In a way, if you know more about his character and the fact that he has these powers essentially, right, and no one really knows where he came from in the first place, it kind of makes more sense of why he's there. One detail that I found really interesting, which might mean nothing, but I don't think anything means nothing in this game, is he calls Alan Tom all the time. Like, he always calls him Tom.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be getting more of the
Wasn't he
other
calling-
persona.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't he calling him Tom because Tom was the person who wrote the movies that he liked in his
Well,
reality?
So I
Yeah,
have,
he's a screenwriter.
but he's also a poet in the first game, right? This is the thing. So
Yeah, it's the same person.
yeah. So my thing was, why has he changed from a poet to a screenwriter? That was a weird little thing for me.
They explained that at some point. I'm certain they explained that bit.
Interesting. Maybe I just
I'm
missed
pretty
that.
sure I remember that.
But there is, and I'm not the only one that has had this thought, but I have seen some speculation that people basically said that somehow Alan Wake is actually related to Tom, whether that be that Tom kind of, tried to use Alan as this way of getting out of the dark place, and therefore that's why they look alike and all this kind of stuff.
I mean, no, I don't think it's that they're related. I think it's the same thing where we don't know how real Sam Lake's character is, because he was written in by, like, he was the guy from the movies, right? He was the main character of all of his other stuff. Probably a similar thing with Alan Wake and Tom, where Tom's written this guy, be that in his poems or in the movie. And then it's become real and it's folding in on itself.
But that's kind of what I love, right? Is they've left. There's so many questions with this game, and they do kind of answer a lot of things as well. But they've kind of left it in this weird way where you really don't know what is real and what isn't. Like, there was a part during this game where I genuinely thought Saga wasn't going to be real. Like,
I didn't think Saga wasn't. I question her family and like where that's left off, like how much of it is actually real. But it seems like the more you go, the more, like, because I get why you didn't think she was real, because she doesn't know,
and just early in the game as well, they kind of fake you out with certain things, right? They kind of do little things which lead to this idea of maybe she isn't real, because there's that thing they always do where they make her and Alex Casey, the real Alex Casey apparently, always drink at the same time. And it kind of felt like, is that a point of like them trying to say maybe they're both not real?
Maybe. I think that was just a reference to something they kept doing in Twin Peaks.
Yeah, that was a Twin Peaks reference.
Yeah. I didn't watch Twin Peaks, but I know that was a reference to that. No, I get where you're coming from with the Saga stuff. I thought it was more everyone remembers something she doesn't.
Yeah.
I was fully expecting we were going to get to it at some point where her kid was actually dead, because the drowned kid.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's something we'll probably get to at some point, that her kid is actually dead.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
That's just a thing they're gonna keep.
Again, too, if you have like Scratch like kidnap the kid and put her in there, she has that chance of actually drowning in that story, kind of.
Or maybe that's the thing. They say she drowned, like Alan Wake supposed.
Do you know what I want to know? Do you know what I want to know about this whole narrative? If Alice went back into the dark place, where the fuck is she?
She hasn't gone
the
back into the dark place.
Part of the dark place.
Yeah, the darkest place.
The darkest place.
I don't think she's actually gone into the dark. place yet. I think that might be DLC that we play as her.
Interesting. Okay, interesting.
So that's that second one where they said that we're gonna like figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's probably where we're gonna see her.
So let's talk.
And she was more what they teased in the Control DLC more than Alan Wake. It was kind of setting her up a bit more from what I've heard.
They kind of
I haven't actually got that bit yet.
I know that they sort of, because she mentions even in this game about how she went to see people and stuff when she got out and kind of explained to them what she saw and everything. And there is stuff you can find in Control where it literally talks about her. What I do want to talk about here is how they actually tell the narrative in this game, because I've obviously said about it being quite a complicated narrative and quite hard to keep up with at different times. And I think that that's because it's so multi-layered, right? It's a very multi-layered narrative. But also the way that they tell it is really multi-layered as well. In the sense of, like, I mentioned earlier how some of the graffiti in the Dark Place literally plays into that narrative, right? You've got the manuscripts which you can find which play into the narrative, and some of those manuscripts aren't even part of the core story, but they do world building and they tell you what happens to other characters that you've met in the game but you don't see afterwards. It kind of plays out their part for you as well. And then the other part of it is obviously there are literally songs that are part of the narrative in this game. They even do the kind of chapter ending song thing, and if you listen carefully enough to those, they kind of play into the narrative as well. It's
I never really stuck on those. Are they just kind of like recapping?
So
almost
kind of, yeah. So
I couldn't be. I was sat there for a minute. And I was like, "Oh, cool, this is gonna finish and go into it," and it just kept going. And I'm like, "I'm not sitting here and listening to it."
So I do. So I listened to every song, even the one that sounds like it's exactly the same, because it's not the same. That song actually changes over time. But basically, so one of the songs that plays when you first see Alan, you've got the Wide Awake song that plays, and it talks about him being stuck in this kind of nightmare place, and now he's wide awake. It's kind of trying to say to you, he's now out of the place, right? He's now out of the... And obviously that's a misleading thing, as we'll speak about.
The second I saw him in different clothes, I was like, okay, cool. No, he's not.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't pick up on it quite that fast. I did pick up on it later on.
When he gets dressed and you sat down talking to him, I'm like,
interesting. But yeah, I just like, it's so multi-layered in the way that they tell the narrative here, and for me, they balanced it really well. Like, even the live action stuff does a lot of narrative things, right? Like, we spoke about the ending earlier. Literally the entire ending, like the main bit that we spoke about, is completely live action. So it's really interesting the way that they decided to tell this narrative. But I've never seen a game balance so many ways of telling a narrative in such a good way. And I know that Jeff...
I'll play Baldur's Gate 3.
I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3 yet, so I will get to that one for sure. But yeah, I honestly can't believe it. And that's part of the reason, and I said this on our Game Awards predictions to you, Jeff, I really think, like, this game should win Best Direction. At the very least, of any of the awards it could win, I feel like this game should win Best Direction, because they clearly had a very clear vision of what they wanted to make, and they executed on that, and they did it in a way where it all makes sense. And even that musical part with Alan, the We Sing chapter, right, makes sense in this world, and it actually does something that's quite important. like
well, it's like I said earlier, it's just an evolution of them. Like, it's not new things. It's just
absolutely
they're doing it better than they had before, because they've
learned and that's kind of the thing is, because I think I said to you, Luke, when I was early on playing the game, I said, like, this game is doing things I've seen no other game do. And what I mean by that is, obviously we've seen Remedy do a lot of these things before, but I've not seen any game combine this many elements in the way that it does and do it so flawlessly, because, often we'll see games that try to use music as a storytelling device and it kind of falls apart. Or, we'll see, like, with Max Payne, Remedy did the comic book style thing, and that was cool at the time, but it wasn't, it wasn't quite there. The Alan Wake writing thing kind of feels like an evolution of that, and Alan Wake 2 feels like Remedy learning from every game they've made up to this point and doing every single thing they've ever done better than they've done it before. I think that some people will obviously argue that Control's combat was better, and I completely understand that part of it, but Control is also quite a different style of game in many ways.
Yeah.
And therefore
it needed to be better in Control, because that was more of a bulk of the actual gameplay itself.
Yeah, so
up much
so this game is just, like, to me it's astonishing. Like, I don't, and that's why I'm very happy that I mean, I'll tell you now, I'm giving this game a 10 out of 10. And I'm happy that 10 out of 10 doesn't mean perfect on our scale, because no game is perfect anyway. I don't think Alan Wake 2 is perfect, but I do think it's a masterpiece, because it's the first game I've played in so many years where it feels like it's doing something completely original and completely, like, I don't know if I'll ever see another game outside of Remedy do this type of thing. Like, I'm not sure that anyone is ever going to even attempt it,
Well, they kind of tried it with The Matrix. Like, that was the whole thing. Like, you had to play the game, you had to watch the movies, read the comic book,
and that was why people found that story so hard, right?
Well, no, they found it hard because the second half of it sucked. But, like, yeah, they're kind of doing a multimedia kind of thing. I'd love to see, like, them do, like, an actual maybe like TV show or a comic book or something like that with, like, Alex Casey or one of their other characters.
But I think that's what's really clever about this whole universe they've set up, right? Because of the way they've set it up, and because of the fact that they've set it up, that they tell the narrative in all these different ways, means that they could now do a live action Alan Wake or Control thing and have it feed directly into the narrative, unlike other kind of video game live action stuff that we see. It's they
have it all feed back in instead of just being an adaptation of the thing.
So I think they could do some really interesting stuff. I wouldn't put it past them to do something like a comic book. I think that is probably going to happen.
I'd be more than happy if they just kept it all in game.
Yeah.
Because I want a Miles Morales like style shorter game where it's you're just playing as Alex Casey doing some shit, and it's just okay.
And you don't want it like Overwatch, where all the best story bits are outside of the game.
Yeah, no, you do not want that.
I want to talk about. Because obviously we've now talked about story, we've talked about like the core gameplay. I now want to talk about the other elements of the game a bit, because I mentioned audio earlier, but
it's just the arty bit where we just talk about arty for an hour.
We could do.
Game for that. I love arty.
Do you know what? When I walked into that,
where's my arty game?
When I walked into that place,
Cast.
and he was like singing on that stage in Watery in the little place. And
I stayed until he finished.
I literally just stood there.
I was like walking past, going to, it's the save room. I'm like, wait a fucking minute. Hold up, this is important.
Yeah, and it actually is important, right?
Such a performer. He's such a great performer.
I did. There was one moment I had to question his what he was doing though, and it was when he was mopping.
Oh, that's because
rug.
You're not a true fan.
He was mopping a rug. Like what?
He knows what he's doing. He's
You got to clean
professional.
rugs there, Jordan.
Yeah, you do.
Oh,
He knows
man.
what he's doing. He was
Okay,
hiding
okay.
something.
Yeah, he did a
from
music
someone.
for a movie with the Ati and the Janitors.
That's
Yeah,
true. That's true.
classic. Back
Oh
in the
god,
day.
love him. But I wanted to talk about obviously audio, which I mentioned earlier, but it's just incredible. Like audio is, and in horror, like I know that Luke, you said you don't think this is really horror. It still has that somewhat horror edge in the sense of I would actually describe it. I would describe it more as a thriller, right? I would say it's more of it's kind of trying to be a tense thriller which has some horror elements. I don't think it's a horror in the sense of outside of those jump scare moments, it's not actually trying to scare you, it's just trying to put you on edge. It's trying to make
unease you, yeah.
Yeah. But the audio and the visuals are such an important part of that, right? Like, one, I have to say, this is one of the best looking games I've ever seen. Like, it's crazy how good this game looks.
There's sometimes where the character models didn't look that great. Like when you first come out of Saga's gameplay and her and Casey are interrogating Alan Wake at the table there, their character models were their gameplay ones, not the cutscene ones.
Interesting.
And the same thing happens when you come into the house with Alan Wake and Rose is there. She was looking at Alan Wake and her eyes were all bugged out. She's like, "Alan, you're here now," and I'm like, "Calm your eyes, woman!" Like, oh my god.
I think that might have been a bug because I don't remember having that issue. But I remember someone saying about like eyes being quite buggy. So I think that might have been a bug. I don't know if it was.
It could have been, but even then, like again, like the in-game models as opposed to the cutscene models, especially in that Alan Wake moment, I'm like, oh my god, they look horrible here.
Yeah, and to be fair as well,
the environments.
To be fair as well, that room you're talking about, Jeff, where they first talk to Alan Wake, or kind of Alan Wake, should we say?
The lighting was weird. The lighting was weird in that room.
That room looks weird anyway because obviously they're doing the ray tracing thing, right? But it just in that room it has a problem. Yeah. There is a visual problem because there is more visual noise than anywhere else in the game. Like the lighting literally looks spotty. Like, it's very weird.
Because that was the only part of the game where I was like, this looks really bad.
Yeah.
And then when she like leaves that room and goes down the hallway, anything that's metal is so shiny that it is glaring, unbelievably bad. But that part and the part with the eyes are the only part of the game where I can be like, this looks bad. Everything else looks great.
Yeah, and
that must have been a console issue because I didn't notice that.
Interesting.
For that section when I played.
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure the PC version is going to be better. It requires
more.
There was a lot of like frame rate issues.
Yeah, you did have some.
The PC version. There was like
it's like a shader compile.
No. It was it was like it had like memory leak where like they'd like not use something but hadn't actually removed them from the game files or whatever, so it was still trying to
so over time the longer you played the worse the performance would get. That's really frustrating because that's one of those things, to be fair, that can actually happen to any game. It's a weird thing, and that's actually quite common. Luckily,
I had to like stop and like restart every
luckily it is something that's quite easy to fix. Obviously the problem is, as a player playing a game like this, having to stop and restart and stuff like that can just really become frustrating. So that's a shame. But yeah, I'd like, especially when you're in the dark place and you're kind of walking around the New York, the weird version of New York. Like, this game is incredible with how it looks. The way that, different things reflect, and like I say, you get these like shadow men moving around, and the way that they even disperse when they, when you shine the torch on them. You don't necessarily have to do the powerful shine, but as you as you kind of walk towards them, they disperse, right? And even that is a really interesting effect they use there. Something else,
they reused that from Control.
yeah,
I was like, I reckon.
yeah.
Like the parts where you have to like shine on those like 3 little nodes to like break through a dark wall. I had an enemy on the other side of it that hadn't passed through yet. So whenever I would try to like line up the shot for those 3 nodes, it would try and shoot to the enemy. So I wasted all of my battery trying to get there, and I had to run around looking for other places where it would regenerate batteries because the enemy would not come on that side of the wall. So I had to sit there and like line up a shot just to kill the enemy to then get through the door again.
You definitely sounded like you had some bugs, Jeff.
It sounded like there was more issues on console than PC this time.
Yeah.
And like at that point, I got so fed up that I fired off all of my light charges, and I'm like, okay, game, let's see what I can do without the light. And then right after that was the scratch fight.
Oh God.
And I was like, go hell.
But yeah, so they use some, but they also do something really cool visually, which they did sort of do in Control as well, but the way it's done here I thought was better. And that is when you find the echoes, and then you'll have like a little scene play over the top of the gameplay, and it's not obviously in game. It's almost like a live action scene that is actually put over the top. I thought that stuff was quite cool. I thought it was improved from Control. With Control, I always felt like it took up too much of the screen, and it was almost like, you must now have your full attention on this, you know.
I thought that because I've been playing Control a little bit afterwards because I want to go back and be like, oh cool, I did, this hints to this and whatever.
Interesting.
I never thought that. I found it more like framing. It was like framing what it was talking about, sort of thing.
Interesting. Maybe I should go back and take a
lot
look.
of it. I like a lot of it. If it's like happening while you can still move around, it'll have like the color around the edge, but like that middle bit where it's the person is like cutting it out so you can still see what's going on, like pretty normally, sort of thing.
I did feel, like I said, I just felt like it was improved here, and I haven't played Control in a number of years now, so I would have to go back and kind of look at it. But I really liked the way they did that stuff here, and the first few times you experience it is obviously when you're looking for the murder site, and you have Alex Casey, who's basically Max Payne, basically looking, and it really gave me Max Payne vibes, like just the setting, the voiceover, like seeing that stuff.
That's what they were going for sure.
Yeah, and I think it was you who said, Luke, that you now can't wait to see what they do with these Max Payne remakes that they're doing, right? They're doing the first 2 games.
Not so much that I can't wait to see what they do, because I never actually played the first 2 Max Paynes. I missed them.
Interesting.
But they've said multiple times now that Max Payne isn't in this universe.
I know it isn't, and
he's probably not going to be. So I'm more interested now if they could give us like a Max Payne, like a very short, like maybe like 4 or 5 hour Max Payne style thing, but with Alex Casey.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm interested to see how Remedy handles all this stuff, because I think this game has, at least based on conversation, it seems to be the one that has finally broke out for Remedy. In terms of, me and Luke always used to talk about how Remedy have always made very, very good games, but they've never kind of had that breakout moment yet. Alan Wake 2 feels like it has been that, in terms of they really have hit the wider conversation for the first time in a very long time, certainly in their history. And yeah, like, I think we heard that Max Payne 1 and 2 is supposed to be next for them. Control 2 is kind of early in development still. I think they said it's not in full production yet, so that's interesting. And then it's kind of like,
they should make a John Wick game. They already have the gameplay model.
They already have the gameplay model. Oh God!
I mean, they got an actor that looks pretty similar.
But it's one of those.
I could do a stand-in. I've got longer hair.
It's one of those interesting things, though.
Yeah, I thought you were doing an Alan Wake play, and I was like, did I miss out? Should I
Because I know that
Estonian
I
jumper?
got the suit. I should have worn the suit.
because I know that they've obviously said that Max Payne isn't in the universe. I think that's the way they actually framed it, is that he isn't in the universe.
Yeah,
and
they
same
just
with,
said it was
and the
Control
same with the
yeah.
same with Quantum
Quantum
Break. I think the thing is that in both of those cases, it's probably just because they don't own the IPs, and
Yeah.
and I wonder whether I said it to you, Luke, that I think out of the two of them, the one that eventually is probably more likely to come in is Quantum Break, because I can see them picking up that IP at some point, even if it's just to
Agree.
connect it more directly.
Hatch is like door is literally Hatch.
Yeah, and that's why.
I disagree. I think Quantum Break's gone. I think they're leaving that behind. I think if there's one that could, I think you've got more chance of doing that with Max Payne, because I think there's probably more chance that they can work out a publishing deal with.
Well, I mean, we've
Rockstar.
discussed that before, right? About how I think I said to you that I feel very much like this Max Payne 1 and 2 remake they're doing is probably the testing ground for, we're Rockstar, we're never going to touch this again, but we know you can make these games. If you can make them and do it in a way that makes us money, we're happy to let you have access creatively to the IP, because it was your IP anyway. You know?
Yeah, and like for me, it's
though,
that
is-
they've reused like Ashworth.
Ashmore. Sean Ashmore.
Iceman. It's either Iceman or it's not, because they're twins.
Yeah,
like,
it is
no,
Iceman. It's
really
the one who's
used it.
Iceman.
The other guy was on Killjoys. I interviewed the guy who was on Killjoys.
Oh, nice.
And asked him if he had played Quantum Break, and he's like, "No." It's like, I don't have an Xbox. It's like, get your brother to hook you up with an Xbox and that game so you can play it.
Yeah. I think that the fact that they've used that actor again, and like Jesse Faden's, obviously a character as well. I feel like they've probably moved away from Quantum Break now.
Yeah, they
I feel like
probably
it's
have.
probably a bit too late for that.
But the weird thing is, until a few years ago, I felt like they'd moved away from Alan Wake. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I never really thought about it until like Control came out and they like started heavily referencing Alan Wake.
Yeah. I think, clearly there was a reason they picked up this IP from Microsoft. Interestingly, the other day I was looking around on YouTube, and you can actually find the original Alan Wake 2 gameplay demo that they showed to press back in 2011. Because, Remedy have spoken about it, but there were lots of different versions of this game. And at one time, there was one that was going to be an Xbox exclusive, which got to the point where they were giving a demo to press to see, so they were clearly quite far along in development. And then Microsoft decided, oh no, we want a new IP instead, and that's where Quantum Break came from. But ultimately, it led to this amazing Alan Wake 2 video game that everybody's talking up and loving, right? So clearly, things went right in that regard. Is there anything else that we really need to cover about this game that I'm forgetting? Jeff, do you have anything in particular?
I think we've kind of covered most things, because we've already gone through like the narrative. There's some of the characters and stuff like that we could probably dive into a little bit, because like you get like the old gods of Asgard.
Well, let's do that then.
Pretty interesting, especially like you have the one guy who thinks he's Thor, and he has his hammer, and he's going like on a crazy binge of like through the old folks' home or whatever. I mean, like some of the characters were actually, pretty interesting. But like especially like the tour guys that run the coffee world and whatnot. Because they played heavily into it, and then you find out what
I loved
doing
about
and
that.
Stuff.
That is actually a narrative point that we didn't discuss that I'd like to discuss, because I actually thought that was quite clever, where they had the cult of the tree, and at the start of the game, you're kind of led to believe that they are some sort of bad force in this world, if you will, right? You're essentially investigating these murders, and then you obviously have the one corpse that comes back to life, which is Nightingale from Alan Wake 1. And you don't really know why that's happened. Obviously, very early on, Saga makes the reference of, like, he is the only corpse that came back to life. But you are led to believe for quite a long period in this game that the Cult of the Tree is something bad, right? And then there's that revelation of, like, when they're in the police cells, right? When the scratch thing starts to happen, and slightly after that as well. And it's like, so basically, for people that don't know or haven't played, sorry, we're going to spoil it, but Alan Wake, or who you think is Alan Wake at the time, becomes Scratch. That plays into
he was always Scratch.
Yeah,
they're the same person. Yeah.
And you find out why that is later on. There's kind of there's a larger narrative reason for that. But what I like about that scene is, like, obviously it's when you get the clicker and he's like, oh, give it to me, give it to me. And then he changes, but you can hear the two brothers saying, like, you don't understand, he is a monster. And then the one, I forget which one it is, but the one who dies, the one who gets killed, basically says, we've been waiting for you, it's like, and it's like they knew it was going to happen. And it's like, that's the point where you start to realize, oh, actually these guys are good. But the weird thing is as well, you still have that part of, like, at the time they're like, Alan Wake is the bad guy, Alan Wake is the bad guy. We don't even know who Scratch is,
Did you play American Nightmare?
No, I've never played American Nightmare.
Right, is that not canon?
Yeah, it is.
I thought it wasn't. I thought they've confirmed it wasn't.
I thought it wasn't, because, like, as Yahtzee, when he did his fully Ramblomatic, he's like, oh, this story, and then pretend like this doesn't exist.
Yeah,
and then
so I thought that Remedy confirmed that American Nightmare isn't canon.
I was going to say, because you kind of see that Scratch takes on the form of Alan Wake.
I know that he takes on the form of Alan Wake, so I was aware of that. I was aware of that part of it.
Yeah, but you kind of, if I remember right, it kind of hints more that it's not that it's just taking the form of Alan Wake.
Interesting.
It's inside of him, sort of thing.
Interesting.
It's not that it's a different thing.
Yeah.
It's an entity that's,
that's really interesting. But yeah, obviously that twist happens. I think everyone could kind of see it coming, but I actually found the kind of smaller twist of the Cult of the Tree not being this bad thing a little bit more interesting, because you'd spent
a cult.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Why not call yourself something more positive? You call yourself a cult, people are going to be like, ugh.
But I mean, it also worked, right?
It felt very
like Ilmo said, like
Dead to me.
Like
when they're all like, everyone's part of this cult, and they were like great or good, and like it felt very Shaun of the Dead. No, sorry, Hot Fuzz, not Shaun.
Oh yeah, Hot Fuzz, yeah.
And like, oh, everyone's part of it. Oh, okay, cool, right, okay, this is.
I did find that I found that narrative thread really, really interesting, just because I think it was quite clever to have this kind of force or group throughout most of the game, or throughout a good chunk of the game, seem like they were going to be something bad that you had to deal with, ultimately then be something that actually you were just misunderstanding what they were doing, and they were doing something very, very good.
And the only time you ever fight them is when they're like possessed.
Yeah.
You never actually fight them as themselves.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because you have those two cops. They're like, "We're gonna make it big. We're gonna join this, and blah blah blah," and then they end up becoming like demonic forces and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I just there were lots of characters I actually did like in this game. We're like more than I expected to.
It was the individual characters I liked more than anything else, to be fair.
Interesting.
I thought they did pretty. It tends to be a common theme in like the games I really really like is when they do individual characters and make them interesting, or not even necessarily everybody's interesting, but there's like something to all of them.
Yeah.
Like even like when you first meet the waitress at the diner,
Rose,
I
yeah.
was like, there's clearly something. Like, is she just insane, or does she know something that Saga doesn't? I like there's just personality, and like they seem like they're actually just thought out characters. They're not just there
Yeah.
to be there for.
And
a
you know
minute
what
sort
the
of thing.
funny thing is even some of the characters that are not very important whatsoever still seem really well thought out and really well placed and actually built upon. Like early on in the game when you interview those two characters in the diner, right? You interview them about what they've seen, but later in the game or depending on when you find it, you can find certain manuscript pages that actually tell you what has happened with them after that point in the story. And yet, you know, they seemed like inconsequential characters, but that was what I was talking about when I was talking earlier about the way the narrative builds in this game, because if you explore and find stuff, this narrative is super rich and they make characters important that in a standard game that doesn't do this kind of narrative world building everywhere, these characters would be like throwaway, don't ever think about again.
There's a huge benefit of like how kind of small this game is as well, because like there's always ambitions of like, oh, it's the biggest game we've ever made, oh, it's the biggest map, and so I can't stand that stuff because it's like, cool, it's just going to be more empty spaces with people that don't matter. You really focus in and you have like maybe 10 characters. Like, you could do so much more with that than you can a massive open world where you just got loads of empty space.
And I also think the other thing is,
like with like you have.
Go on, Jeff.
Sorry, you have Janine with the FBC, but she's the only FBC contact you have. There isn't like four or five other
other
people.
Than that one guy that you encounter in the woods, right? You like when the alarm's going off, and he's like fixing their station or whatever that's in the woods. The head of maintenance or whatever he is. That's
Yeah.
What I did like, and I will, because I wasn't expecting this going into the game. I know they were doing the crossover universe thing between this and Control. I wasn't expecting the FBC to play such a heavy role in this game. I thought that would be something that was built up over time.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I thought that was going to be like a an end credit sort of thing where they show up at the end and be like, "Oh, you've done a good job. Here's our card."
And I also like the fact that they start off the connections between the FBC and this game feeling more Easter egg like, where they're little small touches of, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then
I got a fence at the beginning.
And then later on it's like, oh, okay, we're literally in basically a Control game. It's very, very clever in that sense of like, I think that I think it's because they didn't make a big deal of it either, right? I think it's because
it doesn't feel like it's like ham-fisted in there. Like it makes sense.
Yeah,
the world, like it makes sense.
And also, what I did like about it is if you've played the DLC to Control, the Alan Wake DLC, at the end of it, there's obviously that bit of like, we're getting this alarm in Bright Falls, and it's 2 years in the future, which was setting up the kind of reveal of Alan Wake 2 and then the game and all that stuff. But they actually mention the agent they speak about in that scene is the agent from the FBC that shows up in this game. And I thought that was like a nice, cool touch as well. And it shows that unlike some other kind of multiverses and connected universes that we've seen in other entertainment, I think it shows that they've really thought about this, and it feels like they've actually thought ahead about what they want to do and where they want to go, in a way that not many things ever really have when they're doing this connected stuff. A lot of this connected universe stuff can feel, as you say, Luke, sort of ham-fisted and like we're going to make it fit together just because we want it to fit together. This sort of makes more sense and feels more meaningful, and you get to the point in the game where it's like, oh, Saga, you are now deputized in the FBC, and it's like, okay, so that's clearly going to play into things as we continue to go on in this connected universe. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point along this universe one of the Control games is probably you playing as Saga instead of playing as Jesse. Like, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
I think it would be too
some
much of a
extent.
retread of like playing as Jesse and then Saga. It's like, what, is Saga going to be the second character in every Remedy game?
No,
So I
no,
don't see
but
Saga being playable in Control because you're just repeating the same gameplay system
I
as Alan Wake
I
2.
only see her as playable if she's the only playable character.
that's what I mean. I can
If
see
you
her
don't play
being,
as Jesse again.
yeah, I can see her being in a Control game, which is
I
literally
kind of
her game.
I kind of expect that you'll see them both in whatever Control is.
Yeah, I think
Control is. But I feel
I
like
think
she'll
Jesse will
probably
be
get
the
her own thing as well,
Mhm.
where you actually play a Saga. I think Control 2, you'll be Jesse again, because like
yeah,
that
that's her game.
yeah, it's her game. I forget the name of the gun, but like that
Yeah.
gun is such a like crucial integral part of like the story, and
Mhm.
like there's loads of backstory to it and whatnot.
Yes.
Like to have it there and not to be able to use it because she's the only one that can use it.
Yeah.
You would have to kill her and have Saga take over to be able to use the weapon.
Yeah.
I feel like she'll probably get her own thing.
Interesting. Okay.
Like you'll do like missions where you go out as her, and that's her game.
And that's the
or
thing,
it's
is
DLC
because
or it's Control, whatever.
Control isn't just going to be in the oldest house forever, right? Like, I think we all know that. So that's really, that's going to be interesting to see. I do have, before we talk about a couple more characters, I have a bit of narrative speculation for you guys, just to have a bit of a conversation. Do we think that ultimately Alan Wake himself is going to be the ultimate bad in this game in the end?
No.
Interesting.
I think it turns out Alan Wake isn't real.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And it's all just like going down the line from Tom
Zane. Tom Zane, yeah.
Tom Zane, yeah. It's all just kind of going down the line, and like it's all going to fold in on itself, sort of thing. And maybe that's how it all wraps up. They all folds in on itself, and then it's all just done.
Yeah.
Because like as cool as things that tie in like this are, you do need an endpoint.
Yeah, and I much prefer when stuff has an endpoint, right? And I think it's kind of like when you're watching a TV show and it gets cancelled, but it gets cancelled at a point where it's like they clearly plan to carry it on. I would much rather see something to an actual conclusion that feels like
I was kind of thinking more like,
It's like
what Assassin's Creed ended up doing, where it's like,
Oh,
we
God.
have this, we're gonna come into the modern day, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna end it there, and then they're like, no, money, we'll just keep going.
Yeah.
I feel like eventually Alan will be able to figure a way of controlling Scratch and using him to his advantage.
Yeah. That
So
would be
kind
cool.
of Hulk, Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing.
Yeah. And that could also
Thor is
introduce
probably
some
going to be the
really
biggest issue coming forward.
that
think.
could also introduce, if they ever did that, it would introduce different gameplay for Alan, because the thing about Alan at the minute is his gameplay is what it is because of the narrative in those games. And okay, there's a few interesting things you could probably do with it, but it's never going to be significantly different from what it is.
Like, if they do Alan Wake 3, I feel like by that point he's probably figured out how to rein in Scratch and get to use him to his advantage, and you'll have to, because Saga's not going to be around for everything.
And I also think the other thing that's quite cool about what they've set up here is they've made Saga a really interesting character, to the point of like what we were just talking about, where she could potentially get her own games at some point in this connected universe. And that could be a way of like, we said we want a definitive end, but it could be that we get a definitive end to the Alan Wake part of this universe. and then actually something else carries on that's a little bit different, right? So let's say Alan Wake 3 is the end of the Alan Wake saga, for example, and then you have Jessie carry on in Control, and you have Saga in her own series of games kind of battling something else. That could be an interesting way to continue things. I know that some people have kind of said what they would like to see with this connected universe is just have, like, if you're only sticking to the 2 games, have it be a trilogy for each set of games and then have it end, because that's kind of a nice way of, like, 2 trilogies connected, done, and you don't need to go much more than that.
I don't think Saga will get her own game.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if she will. I just don't see where.
Like, I can see DLC, but not a whole game.
Yeah. Or maybe like a shorter.
I guess part of it as well.
I
guess part of it as well is at the moment we don't know how crucial of a character she actually is, right? So that makes it hard to judge because we don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think it has. Like, I don't think her importance in the role denotes her having her own game.
Interesting.
Because when you look at it, she doesn't have a gameplay mechanic that really services a whole game. Because like Jessie in Control has her powers and stuff, so therefore, boom, video game idea. Yeah. Alan Wake has his writing and all that other kind of stuff. She's basically just like off-brand Resident Evil injected into this. So it's just like, but then I guess she has her like her powers of.
I agree,
mind
but then I guess
stuff.
they also have the part with her having like the seer powers or whatever, and I think that could be something that becomes a gameplay mechanic.
Or it just does lead her to being a side character.
Yeah.
In Control. She's
maybe she is the one that's going to be a side character in every single one of these games. Like, maybe that's what she's there for. I'm interested to see where her character goes because she was really interesting. And actually, I found her quite bland to start with, weirdly. But as the game went on, and things start to kind of unfold with her, it was super interesting. It was
I mean,
what if they brought Deadly Premonition into Alan Wake? Complete the Twin Peaks thing.
Oh god,
that would be very interesting. I mean, let's be real. The only person that actually needs a game out of this is Artie. Like, Artie needs a game, a movie. Like, he needs an entire franchise.
Power Wash Simulator.
I want those records to actually come out. Yeah, exactly.
Oh god.
Just call it Artie. Like, you don't need to like. There's a movie, a TV show, an album, books.
But I think you actually hit on a really good point as well, Luke. They've set up enough characters here that they could have smaller games with some of these kind of more side or supporting characters, if you will, in almost like a Miles Morales type way, where it's like, you know, maybe Alex Casey does get a 5-hour game, which, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you get a theme park builder with the twins or the brothers. Like,
oh my god!
You got a business management sim with that weird woman who thought, you know, your kid was dead. I can't remember what she was called either. Like, yeah, there's loads of things you could do.
I can't wait to see what the future of this Remedy
Guitar Hero with the old gods of Asgard.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, that'd be brilliant.
And you got to play it where like you have to drive the van as well as you're playing. Like, it goes down the hill, and you have to like steer and play music at the same time.
Yeah. One person's it's a co-op game. One person's got to drive, the other person's got to, and then you switch over because one of them's terrible at driving and keeps crashing.
I will say something I didn't mention earlier, which I meant to mention, but it's because I don't think it's actually an issue with the game. I played this game on 2 different Xboxes, and I think the syncing process.
What?
No, I think the syncing process broke my achievements because I don't have them all. And when I play the game, they'll pop up in like a random order, which definitely isn't the order that I got them. So it's almost like they're desynced from the actual gameplay. But
Yeah, Assassin's Creed Vanguard had that same issue. I think Lucy James had talked about it on a podcast.
but that's
Or
why I
her
say
achievements.
I don't think it's a game specific issue. I think it's something on the Xbox side, which is why I forgot to mention it, but I just thought it was worth mentioning as we spoke about some technical issues earlier on. Other than that, like I said, I had the one cutscene that was like had the lip sync issue, which I know was a specific Xbox problem at launch and got fixed in less than a week. They did really well with kind of fixing it really quickly. The other thing is they've been teasing recently adding New Game Plus. I will play that because I want to make sure I get all these achievements. So I'll play it just till the achievements pop up. But
I do want to play it again if they fix the frame rate issue on PC.
that would be that would.
I mean, I want to play it again anyway because
it's
I like
it's just a really great game, and that's why I can understand all of us falling in a slightly different place on it, right? Like I said to you, Luke, this may now be my favorite game of all time, and you know that for me that's quite a big thing because the same two games have been my favorite game of all time for the entire time you've known me, right? So that's a big thing for me to say. Jeff doesn't fall on it as highly as us, but he still doesn't think it's a bad game. I think that tells you how well this game is made and how well crafted it is, that it basically just comes down to the fact that certain elements are hitting people differently, and probably in the case of us three comes down to the fact that the narrative hit more effectively for me and Luke, it sounds like, than it did for Jeff. I know that I don't know about you, Luke, but I was engaged by this narrative literally like an hour into the game.
Yeah. Like I was all over it. Like the fact that I like figured out pretty early most of like where things were gonna go, like didn't really impede any of it. Because I was like, yes, sick, I worked out. That is right, cool.
Yeah.
Like I understand where this is going. Like it makes sense. And like it's just a world like I'm super involved in. Like I played Control and I read literally everything.
Yeah.
And like,
we spoke about that, didn't we? Where both me and you played Control, and we would literally pick up every piece of paper.
Yeah. I was doing the same thing when I've been playing it recently. I'm doing the exact same thing, so I wanted to see if I've missed anything.
And I actually, because I watched a podcast the other day, and they were talking about Alan Wake 2, but they haven't finished it yet. And one of them was suggesting to one of the guys on the podcast who hadn't played it yet, he was like, if you play this game, you have to read everything. And the guy was like, do you mean I have to read everything in the Resident Evil way, or do I actually have to read everything? And he was
the great thing is the manuscript pages have voiceover, so you don't need to read them.
The weird thing is they don't always, though. Have you not noticed? Do they? Because I've had a few that have no voiceover.
I think it depends how you access them, because like you can click on them and it just comes up with a page you can read. But if I can't remember what I did, but everyone I did whatever.
Because I thought everyone did. It's just some of them didn't prompt it in the gameplay.
Interesting, because a few of mine haven't been read out, which is frustrating because I actually enjoyed them.
Like the ones that Saga read out, go back into the menu and like press for them to be read anyway, because she skips shit. She doesn't read the whole thing.
I've noticed. I did notice that. And
she just
and
the important bit.
That kind of goes back to the thing as well, actually, where the game, even though this narrative is complex, the game gives you all the tools to keep up with it, which I really like. And I mentioned like Saga's case board earlier, which does a decent job, but also the manuscript pages, if you're finding them, are a really good way to keep up with the narrative, because it literally tells you like pretty much word for word what happens in the game. And I found like when I didn't play the game for about a week because I was ill, I found that really useful to kind of come back to and be like, okay, I know I found all these manuscript pages. Let's read it just to catch up on. And straight away, I knew exactly where I was. I knew what I was doing. I didn't even have to check my objective. Do you know what I mean? It was a really good way of keeping up with the game. But also, I want to give like special credit to Sam Lake, who I know wrote most of, if not all of this game, as he does with all the Remedy games. But to write something this complex and yet have the level of coherence that it has, and kind of, it does this weird thing where it makes itself almost seem more complex than it actually is. And when you dig a little deeper, it's quite easy to understand underneath.
It is, but it also isn't, because like you dig more, you're like, but wait, does she actually have a kid or does she not?
Yeah.
Like there's enough there where it makes you question it, but it is like digestible.
And that's why I find the two, the old gods of Asgard, like Jeff was saying, I find them really interesting because I feel like we still don't know much about them, and yet they've been quite key characters for the entirety of Alan Wake, and like the first game and this game as well. But it's kind of like, in my head, I'm like, are they basically the same as what RT is? Did they just come out of, like, are they actually human beings or are they something else?
Well, because they go into the dark place at the end. Like, they just walk into the water and then they're gone.
They just seem to, like, fully know how it works opposed to everybody else.
Yeah, so, like, why wouldn't, like, they help Saga? Oh, yeah, hey, by the way, yeah, if you hold these two fingers together when you walk in, you can just walk right back out by splitting them. Like some, like, shortcut.
Yeah.
But they're like, yeah, you'll figure it out, sweetie. Goodbye. We're gonna go, like, fine, blah blah. And then they just.
It also feels like maybe they are characters that know everything that not only has happened, but maybe they know everything that will happen.
Ish, yeah. Like at the end, they go in because Saga's there.
Yeah.
Right. That's where Saga gets caught because you're Alan Wake on the beach, right?
Yes.
And that Saga's stuck there, so they go in after her, sort of thing. Because that's the only time she actually goes like properly into the dark
because the other times are just the overlaps, right? So it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's honestly though, it's so deep that like I feel like we could do a podcast that's just about the narrative and talk about it for hours, because there are so many layers to it and there's so many little things that it's like, what does this mean? And like, there is actually a twist in this game that we haven't even spoken about, but kind of is part of the twist to do with Alan Wake and Scratch, where obviously there's a part of this game where you think Alice is dead, right? Like you're led to believe that she killed herself, essentially. But the reason she killed herself is because of Alan, or that's what you think at the time. It's like Alan was essentially haunting her.
Yeah, she faked her death. Yeah.
Without realizing he was haunting her, and it's like, even that was cool. Of like, okay, that's a neat little thing, because you go through the game obviously thinking it's Scratch, not really understanding at that
it's like
point.
A weird time loop sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really clever. And then there's there's the elements of like, I'm gonna,
when he like comes in and shoots himself in the head.
Yeah,
like
that was a moment.
I love that bit.
That was because that was a moment where I was like, okay, now I get it.
Because like with the dark place, like time's weird. It seems like everything's happening at once.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't seem like time is this. Like,
and it's almost like this multiverse, right? It's almost like the multiverse thing where all of these things are kind of happening, but they're overlapping and intersecting with each other.
Really a multiverse, more of a time loop.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a multiverse. It's just time is very weird. Like time is on top of each other rather than being in a straight line.
Yeah, and that's why that's where the spiral line comes from, right? That's where it's not a loop, it's a spiral. That's where it comes from, because I like that is the part I actually really like about the ending. I like that they do that as like the last line, because the same way that, you know, the last line in Alan Wake, the first game, was kind of ambiguous, but it's that thing of like, okay, Alan's actually figured out something that he didn't know before, but
I do wonder with that if it is kind of like, yeah, like Doomslayer Link kind of situation potentially, where like, you know, you had Zane before,
yes,
but then he had to create Alan Wake, and then Alan Wake's created this, and then, you know,
yeah,
that it is just going to keep happening with new characters because like it's just the way it has to happen. Like you have to have an Alan Wake to fight.
Whereas like there's speculation
whatever.
that there always has to be somebody in the dark place, right? There has to be someone in the dark place in order to sort of contain the dark presence there. And that is something that's actually really interesting because...
Which will work out to be Door, probably.
Yeah.
The dark presence.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super, super interesting, and I can't wait to see where they go with it.
The dork presence?
The
I'm trying to combine his name into dark.
No, I'd be the dork presence. That'd be me. That's what this cosplay is.
Dork presence.
It's just really crap Alan Wake.
Just rename your YouTube channel. Welcome to the dork presence.
Oh god.
This is the dork place.
Oh my god. Well, you know, it's been a pleasure to talk about this game. Like I said, I think we could talk about it for hours. I think it's safe to assume that if we continue this podcast for a very, very long time, Luke will probably join us here for each one of these Remedy games.
Possibly.
And you know, we may see more of Luke when the games arise that Luke has played and we have played. Luke will join us on these spoiler casts, I'm sure. Luke plays a lot of horror games. Go and check out his channel. Because he also plays some crazy games here and there that no one's ever heard of. But that's always fun.
We'll do the Sonic Frontiers 2 spoiler cast.
Oh my god.
Oh, I actually didn't really get too far with Sonic Frontiers. Something else came up. I was more interested in playing that.
Interesting.
You don't miss much with that.
Luke, before we get out of here, is there anything in particular you'd like to plug?
I have videos that are going out at some point.
Cool.
I don't have a schedule. Stuff just happens.
Yes, yeah. I have noticed that, but I would say if Luke doesn't want to plug them himself, just go and watch every single one of his YouTube shorts because they are hilarious. Like I haven't.
The shorts do fine on their own. Go watch my actual videos. Go watch the main videos. The shorts are just like little tasters of what's in the actual video.
Yeah.
Like,
Go
if
and
you
watch.
like the shorts,
I'll tell you what. Go and watch Luke's Spider-Man 2 playthrough. That's what's up on the channel right now, isn't it, Luke?
What? In progress. Yeah, I've just got a bit more editing to do of one episode.
Nice.
At the minute, Garden of Banban's completely done.
Okay, nice.
Probably go watch that.
This is what I mean. Who's heard of that game ever?
Loads of people. Garden of Banban's a.
Oh god.
Game.
Me and Jeff will have more reviews out soon over on the site. I'm sure Jeff has probably done some already by the time you're seeing this episode. Hopefully my Alan Wake 2 review will be out by the time you're seeing this episode, because we actually last week's episode is delayed, so that's going to go out earlier in the week, and then you'll probably be getting this episode on the day of the Game Awards, which is Thursday. And then next week we'll do reactions to the Game Awards and everything. I hope you've enjoyed this Spoilercast, because for me, Alan Wake 2 is the best game I've played this year. At the moment, it will be my game of the year. I still have a few things to catch up on and go and finish. Like, I want to finish Hi-Fi Rush, which I keep saying. Haven't done that yet. But yeah, at the moment, for me, Alan Wake 2, Game of the Year. I'm intrigued to see what awards, if any, it will win at the Game Awards, even though that's just a popularity contest, ultimately, as we've discussed for many years now. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. Like I said, if you're from Luke's channel, please subscribe to us, like this video, share it with your friends, and, you know, check out the website for more of me and Jeff, and go and check out Luke, because he honestly is one of the best YouTubers that I know. And, how close are you to that 1,000 subs now, Luke? Pretty close, right? You're getting there.
Nearly 200.
You're getting there. So let's help Luke get a little bit closer to that 1,000 subs.
Jump into my comments and tell me who I look like.
Oh yes, this is a running theme with Luke.
Used
He's
to
had
get
some
raped.
really interesting ones.
I had a string. I don't know if you know, Jeff. I had a couple of months where people kept commenting Drake. I'm like, what the fuck are you on about?
Yeah, I think I remember seeing little bits of that.
That is
I don't
hilarious.
understand it. Don't get it.
Do we have any trivia? This is the question. The last trivia question was, what was the first review I did for Analog Stick Gaming? Jeff, do you want to tell people the answer? Do you remember?
I'm pretty sure it was AEW Fight Forever.
It was, which was
Wolf.
yeah. Yeah.
Dreadful game.
So I'll give you a trivia question which is related to Luke's channel, and I believe you can still find this on Luke's channel. But
I have deleted nothing.
Luke used to review video games. Your piece of trivia is, which is the last review, and I'm talking about review, not playthrough, that Luke did on his channel before he changed the direction of his channel. He may not even remember, but if you find it, leave it in our comments, leave it in his comments. This is a fun little bit of trivia. And like I said, whoever answers one of these trivia questions first, which isn't one of us, will get a prize. It's Christmas time coming up real soon, and I will give a prize to somebody that answers one of these trivia questions. So go and find out what was the last game that Luke reviewed on his YouTube channel, Eat Sleep Game, which is linked in the description. And
do you know?
I think I do. I do have to go and check, but I think I know.
We'll check in a minute.
Yeah, we will do. And
I've just confirmed I do know what it is.
Nice. Until next time, and until the next time we see Luke. Luke, it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you for joining us. You are our first guest on this podcast, which interestingly, you were kind of the first guest on my last podcast.
Yeah, I guess technically.
There's a running theme.
You may have others, but no one else is going to be the first.
That's true. That is true. And we will see Luke again. Like I said, go and check him out. And until we see you again, it's a goodbye from me.